All right, so let's dive into this no-dig gardening. You've been pretty curious about this, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We've got this transcript here.
Uh-huh.
Looks like it's from,
Pretty in-depth.
yeah,
It's like a YouTube video.
yeah, pretty detailed YouTube video. And it seems like you're really aiming for, yeah, like maximum efficiency in your garden. Less work, more tomatoes.
Yeah, you got it. And no dig really delivers
Okay.
on that promise. Even if your starting point is, you know, more weed patch
Yeah.
than garden paradise.
Okay, so walk me through this. So I get it's called no dig, but how does that actually work?
Yep.
Are we talking about some like high-tech weed zapping laser or what?
Not quite.
Uh,
It's way more low-tech and honestly more elegant.
okay.
The core concept is using materials like cardboard and compost
Okay.
to create a barrier over existing weeds. It's like tucking them in for a very long nap, a nap they don't wake up from.
So it's about depriving them of light rather than yanking them out by the roots. That actually seems pretty brilliant, especially since I know you had amazing success with this in your own garden. This transcript mentions you transformed a real jungle
Yeah.
into a thriving space.
It was a total jungle. Grass, dandelions, even some crazy bindweed. It seemed to have roots going down to the Earth's core.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, within a year,
Wow.
the no-dig method completely flipped the script.
Yeah.
Now, the toughest weed I face is the occasional volunteer tomato seedling.
Oh, that's great. But this transcript also mentions planting directly into compost.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I always thought you had to mix it into the soil, not just plant right in it.
Right.
Any truth to that?
It's a myth. Planting directly into compost is not only fine, it's actually a huge advantage, especially with no dig. Compost is packed with nutrients that are released slowly over time, making it like a gourmet buffet for your plant's roots.
And speaking of compost, this transcript isn't shy about the options. We've got homemade, horse manure, cow manure, even wood chips.
Yeah,
It seems like there's a compost for every taste.
there really is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great things about no dig. It's super adaptable. You can experiment with different compost types and find what works best for your soil, your climate, and the specific plants you're growing.
So let's get down to the science behind this whole no-dig magic.
Yeah.
We've talked about light deprivation.
Yeah.
But what's the bigger picture in terms of how this benefits the soil
Yeah.
and the plants?
Think of it this way. Every time you dig or till the soil, you're disrupting a really complex underground ecosystem. You're breaking up the natural structure,
Yeah.
exposing all the beneficial microbes to the elements,
Okay.
and essentially starting from scratch every season.
So no-dig is more about working with that existing ecosystem rather than constantly disrupting it.
Exactly. By leaving the soil undisturbed, you're allowing those beneficial bacteria, fungi, all those critters you can barely see under a microscope, to thrive. They break down organic matter, create channels for air and water.
Right.
Basically, they just do all the heavy lifting to create that fertile, living soil we all dream of.
All right, so I'm starting to see the appeal of letting those underground heroes do their thing.
Yeah.
But before I go full no-dig, what about site selection? Does this method work anywhere, or are there certain spots that are better suited for it?
Sun and shade definitely play a role. For example, you mentioned you're interested in growing some shade-loving plants. Now, while that's totally doable, too much shade, especially in a cooler climate,
Right.
could make things a bit tricky. You might need to get creative with your compost choices or think about how to maximize that sunlight penetration.
That's a good point. I also have some large trees and hedges around my property. Could those be a problem?
It's definitely something to consider. You know, their roots could compete with your garden plants for water and nutrients. So you might need to strategize a bit.
Okay, noted. Now, another thing I'm curious about is uneven terrain. My garden has a few dips and bumps. Does no-dig work on slopes, or does everything need to be perfectly level?
It's definitely adaptable. But if you're creating long-term beds on uneven ground, using topsoil to fill in those depressions and create a level surface is a good approach.
And why topsoil instead of just more compost?
Good question. Compost is amazing for nutrients and soil structure, but it can settle over time. Topsoil is denser and less prone to shifting, making it a better choice for creating a stable base, especially if you're planning to build raised beds on top.
That makes sense. Speaking of stability, this transcript mentions some truly epic weeds: bindweed, dandelions, even buttercups. This description of bindweed roots as like the gut of the gut
Huh?
is pretty vivid and slightly terrifying. Does no dig actually stand a chance
It does.
against those underground monsters?
And honestly, that vivid description is spot on.
Yeah.
Bindweed roots are notoriously tough and can spread like crazy.
Yeah.
But the beauty of the no-dig method is that even those tenacious roots will eventually decompose under that layer of cardboard and compost.
Wow.
It takes a little patience.
So even the most stubborn weed eventually surrenders to the power of darkness and decomposition. That's reassuring.
And while we're on the topic of decomposition, let's talk about those different compost types in a bit more detail.
Yes, please. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the choices. Homemade, horse manure, cow manure, wood chips. Is there a best option for no-dig, or does it depend on the situation?
It really depends on what you're growing, your soil type, and your climate. For example, horse manure is fantastic for heat-loving crops, like tomatoes and peppers. But since you mentioned you're in a cooler climate and have a lot of shade, composted wood chips might be a better option.
Oh, okay.
They break down slowly, releasing nutrients gradually over time,
Okay.
which is ideal for cooler conditions.
Well, that's helpful. I always thought wood chips were just for mulching pathways, not for actually, like, feeding the soil.
But they're great for pathways, too.
Okay.
But in the no-dig world, we try to nourish the soil everywhere, not just in the planting beds.
Right.
Using less desirable compost for paths is a great way to recycle those resources and keep those beneficial microbes happy throughout the garden.
So it's all about, like, a holistic approach to soil health.
Absolutely.
I like that.
And speaking of taking a holistic approach, let's talk about cardboard, the other key player in the no-dig game.
Perfect, because I have to admit, the idea of just slapping down some cardboard and calling it a garden bed feels a little too good to be true. Are there any special techniques or tips to make sure it works effectively?
There are definitely some best practices.
Yeah.
First, always remove any tape, staples, or plastic bits from the cardboard.
Okay.
We want it to decompose naturally, not leave behind any unwanted residues in the soil.
Makes sense. So we're aiming for pure, unadulterated cardboard goodness.
Exactly. And while most printed cardboard is fine, it's best to avoid glossy cardboard. It often contains plastic and doesn't break down as easily.
Okay.
Plain brown cardboard, that's like the gold standard for no-dig.
So I should be picturing myself meticulously laying down plain brown cardboard like a giant puzzle, making sure there are no gaps for those sneaky weeds to poke through.
You got it.
Oh.
Overlapping the pieces is key to achieving complete light exclusion, which is the foundation of the no-dig method.
Yeah. I'm starting to get the hang of this. Now, I have a question about planting depth.
Huh?
Does the cardboard affect how deep I plant? And what happens to the roots as they grow?
Great questions. Planting depth depends on how much compost you're using and how many weeds you're trying to smother. Initially, the roots will establish themselves within that top layer of compost. But over time, as the cardboard breaks down, those roots will penetrate through it and reach the soil below.
So it's a gradual process, but ultimately they have access to the full soil profile.
Absolutely, and that's one of the beautiful things about no-dig. You can start small, experiment with different techniques, and gradually expand your no-dig area as you gain confidence and witness those amazing results firsthand.
I have to admit, my skepticism is fading fast. I'm starting to see the appeal of this whole no-dig approach. It's simpler than I imagined, yet it seems to have these profound implications for soil health and like the overall ecosystem of the garden.
That's exactly it. It's not just about skipping a step or two in the gardening process. It's about embracing a whole new way of thinking about our relationship with the soil and the intricate web of life that thrives beneath our feet.
I'm definitely feeling inspired, and I think we've covered a lot of ground already. But before we move on, I do have one more question that's been bugging me.
I'm all ears. What's on your mind?
This transcript mentions using black polyethylene plastic for larger areas, which seems a bit counterintuitive for a method that's all about embracing these natural processes.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's more to this than meets the eye.
You're right to question that. Using plastic might seem at odds with the no-dig philosophy, but it's actually a really strategic tool.
Okay.
Especially when you're dealing with a large area that's completely overrun with weeds.
So it's like more of a short-term intervention to get things under control.
Yeah.
And then we switch to the gentler cardboard and compost approach.
Exactly. Think of it like a weed smothering fast track.
Okay.
The black plastic heats up the soil, essentially solarizing it.
Wow.
Which kills off weed seeds and even some of those stubborn perennial roots.
Okay.
It's not a permanent solution, but it can give you a head start in reclaiming a neglected space.
And the transcript emphasizes that the plastic is reused, right? We're not talking about single-use plastic sheeting.
Absolutely not. That would defeat the purpose.
Yeah.
You want to invest in a good quality, thick black plastic
Okay.
that you can use season after season.
Got it.
Once that initial weed suppression is done, you can remove the plastic and start building up those lovely layers of cardboard and compost.
Okay. That makes a lot more sense. It's about finding that balance between practicality and, sustainability. Choosing the best tool for the job while minimizing our impact on the environment.
That's the heart of the no-dig approach.
Yeah.
It's about working with nature, but also understanding that sometimes a little intervention can be beneficial in the long run.
This is all making me rethink my whole approach to gardening. I've always been a bit of a control freak in the garden, meticulously planning, weeding, amending the soil. But this no-dig method seems to be saying, hey, trust the process, let nature do its thing,
Right.
and you'll be amazed by the results.
And that's exactly what I found.
Wow.
It's about shifting our mindset from battling nature to collaborating with it.
Now, speaking of letting nature do its thing, I'm curious about the longevity of a no-dig garden. Does the cardboard eventually break down completely?
It does.
And what happens to those layers over time?
Over time, that cardboard becomes part of the soil food web. It decomposes, providing food for those beneficial microbes we talked about, ultimately contributing to the overall organic matter content of your soil.
Okay.
As you continue to add compost year after year, those layers build up, creating a rich, fertile environment that your plants will absolutely love.
So it's almost like building a lasagna of goodness,
Right.
layer upon layer of organic matter.
That's a great analogy. And the best part is, as those layers decompose, they release nutrients slowly, providing a consistent source of food for your plants. It's like setting up a slow-release fertilizer system that just keeps on giving.
That's amazing. And I imagine with less weed pressure, you're spending less time weeding.
Exactly.
More time enjoying your garden.
No more backbreaking digging, no more endless weeding, just happy plants and a thriving ecosystem.
So with this no-dig method, are we essentially creating a self-sustaining system?
Wow.
Once those layers are established, do we even need to add more compost each year?
Well, it's not entirely self-sustaining yet. We haven't quite achieved perpetual garden motion.
Right.
But by continually adding organic matter, whether it's compost, leaf mold, or other organic materials, you're feeding that soil ecosystem and ensuring its long-term health and productivity.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about working with nature's rhythms, not trying to outsmart them.
Exactly. It's about understanding that nature operates in cycles of growth, decay, and regeneration.
Right.
And by working within those cycles, we can create a garden that is both productive and sustainable.
This deep dive has been so enlightening. I've not only gained knowledge about a specific gardening technique, but also a whole new perspective on our relationship with nature.
I'm thrilled to hear that. It's amazing how something as simple as not digging can spark such profound insights.
It really is. And while we've delved into the practicalities and the science behind no-dig, I feel like there's an even deeper philosophical layer here, like a shift in how we view our role in the garden and our connection to the natural world.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're not separate from nature, but a part of it.
Right.
And by working with nature rather than against it, we can create a more harmonious and abundant world, both within our gardens and beyond.
This has been such a rich conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like I've learned so much already. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I have one more question that's been on my mind.
Fire away. I'm always happy to keep exploring.
So we've talked a lot about the benefits of letting the soil, just be. But this transcript also emphasizes the importance of how we introduce those initial layers of cardboard and compost. It mentions being really meticulous about removing like tape and staples and even avoiding that glossy cardboard. Is that level of detail really necessary? Or can we relax a little?
I admire your desire to simplify things, but trust me, those details matter. Remember, we're aiming to create a healthy ecosystem, and that means being mindful of what we introduce into it.
So it's not just about aesthetics. Those little bits of plastic could actually have a negative impact.
Exactly. Plastic doesn't belong in the natural decomposition cycle. It can persist in the soil for years, potentially harming those beneficial organisms we've been praising.
Right. Okay. And what about glossy cardboard? Is it just the plastic content, or are there other reasons to avoid it?
Glossy cardboard often has a clay coating that can hinder decomposition. Plus, it just doesn't break down as readily
Okay.
as plain brown cardboard, which is like the gold standard for no dig.
So we're picturing ourselves carefully peeling off every bit of tape and staple, channeling our inner no-dig perfectionist.
I wouldn't call it perfectionism, but a bit of mindfulness goes a long way. It's a small effort that pays off in the long run by ensuring a healthier soil environment.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the nuances of no-dig gardening. It's not just about throwing down some cardboard and walking away.
Right.
There's a real art and science to it.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And like any art form, mastering the techniques allows you to express your creativity and achieve truly remarkable results.
And the more we understand the principles behind those techniques,
Yeah.
the more confident we can be in adapting them to our unique gardens and growing conditions.
Right, precisely. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Sure.
No dig is a framework, not a rigid set of rules.
Okay.
It encourages experimentation and observation, empowering each gardener to become a bit of a soil scientist in their own backyard.
I love that idea. And honestly, this whole conversation has sparked a renewed sense of curiosity and wonder in me. I can't wait to get my hands dirty, or should I say not get my hands dirty, and start experimenting with no dig in my own garden.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, no-dig gardening is a journey, not a destination. There's always something new to learn, something new to try. Embrace the process, observe the changes, and trust the wisdom of nature.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this fascinating exploration. I feel like I've not only gained a wealth of practical knowledge, but also a deeper appreciation for the interconnectedness of all things in the garden.
It's been my pleasure. And remember, the most successful gardens are the ones that are tended with curiosity, care, and a deep respect for the natural world.
Right.
Happy no digging.
That's a wrap on our No Dig Deep Dive. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of sustainable gardening and found inspiration to transform your own outdoor spaces. Keep those questions coming, keep experimenting, and keep digging deeper, haha, no pun intended, into the wonders of the natural world. Until next time, happy gardening.